What's up, you guys? Jaden here with the Moonlight Craftsman channel, where we do everything woodworking, metalworking, and more. In this video, we are going to add bow ties into this piece of wood so that we can prevent crack from extending. Coming up. So in order to make this work, I cut out some jigs on the water jet, and the way we do this is with a router and a bushing that just follows this edge, and I'll show you that in just a little bit. And so you have one jig for the negative that'll cut the hole in the wood, and then you have one jig for the positive, for the maple in this case, that goes into the walnut in this case. I originally did a prototype. This is from this same slab, but this is oak right here. And on this one, it had rounded corners. That was the first jig of the positive that I made. And I like the looks of it, but it looks a little bit like CNC, too much CNC. So I kind of wanted to do square corners there. And I'll show you how to do that. It's not as hard as you think. So I have this knot here, and there's some cracks that are starting to extend out after I got it flattened. So like I said, these bow ties are a technique to help prevent those from extending further. And here's the first jig that I cut out on the water jet, and I'm just kind of eyeballing it where I think it looks good, marking it, and using some CA glue to hold it down there while we use the router to route out the negative. So you put the CA glue and then a little bit of activator on the other part and press it down, and hopefully we can get it back off. But I do have a little short video on CA glue to fill holes if you want to check that out. There's the bushing that I was talking about. And so the bushing it'll ride on the inside of that aluminum jig. And I'm gonna put in a 1/4 inch up spiral bit here. So I have a plunge router base on this router. And so to get it set, just going to set it on top of the jig, push it down, and then there's an adjustment rod over here. If you just put it all the way down to the bottom, that'll be 0. And then you can reset that little indicator that I got right there on a round number. And I want these bow ties to be about 1/4 inch thick, so I want the hole to be a little less than 1/4 inch, so I'll move it up a little more than 3/16, a little less than 1/4, and then I'll lock that rod again, and then there will be a gap there, so when I push the plunge router down, it should be at the right depth. And then so hopefully you can see that a little bit better right here. So here I'm just making a test hole and gonna measure it, make sure we're at the right depth, and it is. So gonna just go ahead and move it back and forth, make sure I'm touching the edges, and take out the center. And that's what it looks like. Looks pretty good. The bushing keeps it away from the edge there. And then just going to take a block and knock that off and sand down the glue a little bit. And just repeating the process for the other side. So there we have our pockets, and now we need to make the bow ties that'll fit in there. Gonna cut a piece of maple down and go ahead and joint it and plane it. I do have another video on jointing and planing if you want to take a look at that to see the basics on that. So the maple's planed down to about 1/4 of an inch thick, just kind of repeating the process with the glue. And I have a different bushing in there now, a smaller bushing with an 1/8 inch router bit. Gonna go ahead and use the bushing to follow the jig just like we did before, and this is what you get. And so I'm gonna use the chop saw to cut to where there's just a little bit of material left, and that way it doesn't fall apart. But then we can just break the end pieces off, and we're left with bow ties. They're a little bit long, so at this point I need to square up those corners in the recesses. So I'm putting the bow ties on there, and I'm going to make some marks, and then I'm going to come back with the chisel and clean out those corners. You want to use really sharp chisels for this, and it's actually pretty easy. Now, going down only 1/4 of an inch actually provides for a stronger joint, because instead of going all the way through the slab, because now you have that much surface area, long grain to long grain, that's going to be glued up to each other. So we got the corners cleaned out, and now we need to trim down the bow ties so that they'll fit in, very snug. So I'm just putting marks at the end of the corners, and then what I need to do is make a line across there, and then I'm just going to set up a block covering the line. That way it's tight, if anything, because we can just adjust it by sanding a little bit. And then I'll go ahead and take my dovetail saw, put it right up against the block, and just cut it off. So at this point we're just doing final touch-ups. It's obviously just slightly too big right now, which is better than slightly too small. So like I said, we can just sand it a little bit just to fine tune it to where it fits just perfectly in there. And then after it's fitting just right, on the underside, can go ahead and round the corners a little bit so that it goes down easier, and the glue has a little place to go if it needs to. So hopefully we fit it up right, because you can't really push it all the way in there, you'll never get it out. So this is the real test here. So gluing it all up, and gonna knock it down with a hammer with a block over the top of it. And don't force it, guys, just get a bigger hammer. So knocking it all the way down there and wiping off the excess glue. And then at this point, since it's so tight, I just go ahead and use the palm sander, orbital sander, to just sand it down immediately. And I kind of found when I did the prototype that the glue that's there and the sawdust kind of fills any minute cracks or seams that you might see. And that's all there is to it. I mean, it looks pretty dang good, I think. And it's not as complicated as you would think. You could make one of these jigs out of wood if you wanted, or you could have somebody make one, if you know some shop where they could make a jig out of with a CNC machine. Be sure to share the video, guys, and give it a thumbs up if you haven't already, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks.